As always, I shall preface this by saying this is by no means professional. This is just me doing a simple read-through, typically in one take. I might stutter, I might slur. I'll try to slow down and get all them syllables out for you. But it's a story that I did not write. I just love it very much and wish to share it in the medium of this YouTube channel. So without further ado, John Dies at the End by David Wong. Chapter 15, D-Day. Very simply, I said to Amy, the reason we can see things that you can't is right there in this bottle. We don't know where it came from or what exactly it does, but in those first hours after you take it, your brain is tuned in like nothing you can imagine. Eyes like the Hubble telescope, sensing lights and not even on the spectrum. You might be able to read minds, make time stop, cook pasta that's exactly right every time. And you can see the shadowy things that share this world, the ones who are always present and always hidden. It'd be like if a doctor could walk around with a microscope strapped to his eyes all the time, so he could just look and see the sickness crawling around inside us. Amy pointed out, well, you'd still have to be able to see inside your blood vessels and lungs and all that. A microscope wouldn't... These microscopes also have some kind of X-ray vision attachment. She reached out and picked up the canister. Ugh, it's cold. The container is always cold, I said. It refrigerates the contents 24 hours a day, and we don't know how. No batteries, no energy source. It's been working for years. The sauce, it has to be kept cool or it becomes, unstable. Unstable in the way that a swarm of killer bees is unstable. And you're going to take it again? I don't want to, but I think we have to. It'll level the playing field, get us on the same frequency as the bad guys. It's the reason we're alive. Oh, and everybody else who has ever tried it has wound up dead. The irony. I said, when I ran across this bottle, it was empty, just like mine. I opened the bottle and checked out the contents. 2 capsules, black as licorice. I bet you're wondering where these two came from. We're always wondering the same thing. The stuff seems to show up when it wants to. She said, you're not going to let me take any, are you? I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but you're not supposed to take it. If you were, there would be 3 capsules in here. John said, we better swallow these before they attack us. We did. We waited. So, Amy asked, how do you know when it's working? I said, you just, start noticing things. It's hard to explain, like bits of radio signal coming in through the static. With that, a thought passed through my head, a flash like a shooting star. Pro wrestling was real, but not real in the sense that we perceive reality. It was more real than reality. Then, I worked out pi to 4,000 decimal places and realized that if anyone ever drew a truly perfect circle, it would actually look like a straight line to our eyes. I looked at all the silver pill canister and realized it was more than 4,000 years old, or less than 4 seconds. I said to John, you know that if you walked around the world, your hat would travel 31 feet farther than your shoes? John said, I dunno, Dave, but before we make a bomb, I have to shave half the dog. I nodded. He got up, called to Molly, and herded her into my bathroom. I wonder when the soy sauce would take effect. To kill some time, I got up and hunted around in the closet in my laundry room until I found my squirt gun. This was one of those huge modern guns, green and with a logo that said Big Gusher on the side. It had a separate 2-gallon tank with hooks for belt. The commercials bragged it could spray a soaking 1/4-inch wide stream of water for 50 feet, and that was pretty much true. The gun was sticky from when John filled it with beer last summer. I hunted around until I found a roll of duct tape and an extended disposable lighter, the kind people light grills with. I gathered 3 bottles of flammable chemicals I could mix to form the fuel. I took my armload of items and dumped them on the table. Amy said, so, you're making a flamethrower? Amy, we gotta be prepared. We don't know what we'll find in that place, but for all we know, it could be the devil himself. David, what possible good is that thing gonna do? Oh no, you didn't hear me. I said it's a flamethrower. Girls. But if it's something that's from hell, why would you use a... Amy stopped, apparently deciding against pursuing that question and instead asking, what am I taking? When we go? Is there a weapon or something for me? Have you forgotten the woodchuck already? I went to work on the squirt gun. The sound of rustling and growling emerged from the bathroom. Under that, I could detect the low hum of my beard trimmer. Amy put her hand on mine, her other hand balled up in fist on the table. There was a sheep, she said, in Scotland, I think, and this sheep escaped from the ranch. And you know, they shear sheep for their wool. Well, this thing stayed gone for 7 years. Finally, they found it in a cave, and there was nobody to shear the sheep. So when they found it, its wool was gigantic. It was like a walking afro, and it wound up back on the ranch, just another sheep. But for the rest of its life, it knew that for a while it was free. It had that, and nobody could take it away. Do you understand? I'm like you. I want to face this thing, whatever it is. We're like that sheep, taking our shot, if for no other reason than just to say we did. I do understand. Trust me, I do. It takes a special kind of person to make up something so utterly bullshitty. You know their wool doesn't keep growing like that. It's not even the point, David. I went to take her other hand, saw my hand disappear into hers, and realized that it was because she didn't have another hand. But there it was, thin fingers wrapped in a tight ball. She looked down, curious, not sure what I was staring at. I said, I think the sauce is working. Go put on the Scooby glasses. I want to try something. She got up, found them on the counter, then sat down and I gestured to look at the spot where her hand shouldn't be. Now this time, really concentrate. I don't know if... No point in finishing the sentence. Her jaw hung open. Oh, I can see it! How is that possible? She tried it with and without the glasses, saw the hand appear and disappear. Look! My fingernails! I had let them get long and I was meaning to cut them before I went in for surgery. No wonder it hurts. Then she lifted the clenched fist off the table and, very slowly, uncurled the fingers. She laid the hand flat on the table. David, this is crazy. I'm pretty sure that's about the least crazy thing you're going to see today. The bathroom door burst open and Molly came trotting out. The left half of her body had been shaved almost down to the skin. The right half was as shaggy as before. John emerged after that, brushing a layer of dog hair off his clothes. John said, Well, that's done. Before I could stop her, Amy asked, Why did you... It was Molly's idea. She wants to look like two different dogs when she's coming and going. She thinks it'll make it easier for her to steal food. He turned to me. That's one complicated dog, Dave. Have you started on the bomb? The what? Society is doomed for one very simple reason. It takes dozens of men working months with millions of dollars in materials to build a building, but only one dumbass with a bomb to bring it down. John and I had scavenged the house for bomb-making materials. Neither of us knew how to make a bomb prior to today, but we improvised one by analyzing the molecular makeup of the ingredients. My head was taking on a fiery soreness, cooking like an engine run too long and too hard. I wondered, not for the first time, if using the soy sauce would shave years off my life, and I realized that probably didn't matter. So, using a packet of Jell-O and the innards of 2 smoke detectors, and a pack of shredded playing cards, and the refrigerant for my truck's air conditioner, and 9 other ingredients, we fashioned a sticky, explosive clay, mint green in color. We poured it into a tinfoil mold we made in the shape of a dog bone and stuck it in the freezer to solidify. The idea was to disguise it as something that would seem normal being in a dog owner's front pocket, should we get caught and searched. I sat at the kitchen table, snapping brass bullets into the one spare magazine I had bought for the smith. Here's what I think, said John. That facility, they gotta have some kind of intercom system. We sneak our way into the office where the mic is, and put the boombox in front of it. We go right for the fucking jugular. November rain on a loop. While they're all holding their ears and begging for forgiveness, we go find this Korok fucker and shove this bomb right up his ass. Or get him to eat it if it turns out he's a huge dog. I nodded and stood. The real plan, the unspoken one that hid between John's words, was that we would die. But we would die in the middle of what Korok's people would remember as the single most retarded and baffling incident in their history. We would be their Guy Fawkes. They would create a holiday about us. If we were going to wind up in the belly of Korok, might as well see if we can make him choke on the way down. Me and John, I mean, not Amy. I let out a long breath, put on my coat. I dropped in the gun and the spare magazine. John threw on his army jacket and leaned over, unzipped the backpack and pulled out a chainsaw. He had tied a length of bungee strap to it so he could carry it slung over his shoulder. He then picked up the homemade flamethrower, not questioning for a moment what it was or what it did. He flicked on the lighter and a delicate tongue of flame licked out in front of the barrel. He nodded in approval and blew it out, then grabbed the battle axe off the floor and handed it to Amy. She managed to hold it aloft in her one hand for exactly 2 seconds before she let the head cling to the floor. She let go of the handle, then dug some chapstick from her jacket and smeared it on her lips. We were loading up the Bronco when John reminded me of the exploding dog bone. I ran inside, pulled it out of the aluminum foil mold, and walked into the yard with it in my hand. I probably should have seen this next part coming. Molly ran over, half-shaved and half-shaggy, and snatched the bone from my fingers. At John's request, I'll skip over this next part, which involved us chasing the dog around the yard for a very long time, and finally John tackling her, prying open her jaws, and finding no remnant of exploding bone in there. I began to walk away from the situation in disgust when a snow-covered John, still on the ground with Molly, said, "Look!" He was holding up Molly's front paw. I saw nothing unusual about it, but then realized the pie-like symbol we had seen on the carcass of exploded Molly was missing from this dog's paw. Molly licked her nose and sneezed. John stood up. Molly flipped onto her feet and trotted away. I said, "What do you think it means?" "Hell, I don't know. We need the bone bomb back. Take the chainsaw and cut open the dog." Amy objected to this and came up with what I thought was a far more disgusting plan of trying to flush the bone from the other end of Molly. She went inside and dug out 2 convenience store burritos from my freezer and heated them in the microwave until they were lukewarm. After feeding both burritos to Molly and seeing no immediate results, John said, "All right, let's go. We're going to be late for our certain death." Whiteout. There was more snow than air in the atmosphere. We went 15 miles an hour through town. The whole place shut down under the storm. It was, I thought, an actual blizzard. I'd never seen one. About halfway there, John squinted into his rearview mirror. What the hell? Red and blue light swept across the frosted rear window. We all glanced at each other, figuring we could either pull over or plow through the snowstorm for the slowest police chase since OJ. I pulled over, 2 tires ramping up onto mounds of roadside snow. A blue, bear-like figure strode up to the driver's side door. I rolled down the window and felt freezing bits of snow land on my cheek. A face leaned in. I saw it and felt myself tense, my hand going right to the butt of the Smith. Oh, crap. It was Drake. But it was not Drake. His wide face sat 3 inches from mine, an inhuman blankness in the expression, like that of an embalmed body at a funeral. His eyes were pure black. No whites, no irises. I blinked, and his eyes looked human again. Human, but as lifeless as a doll's. Drake's mouth said, "Out." He flung the word at me like a punch. I smelled a puff of breath that was chemically sweet, like a little kid after drinking too much Kool-Aid. Drake yanked open the door and grabbed my jacket, pulling me out. He clamped onto my shoulders and spun me around and pushed me toward the truck. I heard the other door open, and there was John standing there, looking at Drake and knowing what I knew. Drake was gone. The big cop pulled out a baton from a loop in his belt and smacked his palm with it. "So," he said, barking the sound so that it was barely an English word. "So, big smart guy, big guy, dolls and jellyfish, and the night comes to life and walks on Mulholland Drive." He smacked his palm. His pudgy lips spread to reveal a shark's grin. I wanted to grab for my gun, but a swing with that club would break the bones in my wrist in half a second. I don't know if I was poised to make my move or frozen in panic. At any second, the Drake thing could end this little adventure before it got started. I glanced at John, hoping he had some kind of plan. The look in his eyes said he was hoping the same for me. I looked back at Drake's squad car and saw he hadn't come alone. Riding with him was a muscular black cop who was climbing onto the passenger side of the car now, snow landing on his hat, grinning the grin of the freshly mad. Drake stepped around to the grill of my truck. He said, "Mulholland Drive, smart guy, the blue box, the blue key, the blue eye." He swung the stick and a headlight exploded with a crash. Drake smiled again, then bent his knees and leapt 6 feet into the air. He landed on my hood with a thud that rocked the whole truck on its suspension. I saw Amy jump in the back seat, eyes bouncing back and forth between me and John. Molly barked, but made no other effort to help. Drake looked down at me from his perch on my hood. He stuck the end of the baton into his pocket, unzipped his pants, and began pissing on my windshield. Urine splattered and yellowed the pile of snow bunched along my windshield wipers. "Ha! Korok waits in the alley, smart guy." Drake's partner was disrobing. The black cop was flinging clothes into the road, mumbling to himself. He finally yanked off a pair of boxers, put his hands on his naked hips, and screamed something like "tube steak" over and over again to the snowy sky. Drake finished his pee, zipped up. He lifted one shoe, reached down and pulled it off. He peeled off his sock and raised the foot toward me. He stood that way for a long moment, foot raised like a photo of a field goal kicker caught mid-kick. I glanced back and saw the other cop was packing handfuls of snow onto his groin. I looked back at Drake and finally I saw what he was showing me. On his big toe was a tiny tattoo, the pi symbol, just like the old Molly had. "This is just a recording, smart guy." He lowered his foot and pulled out his baton again. He held it up and pointed at me with the other hand. "Now bend over and drop your pants, smart guy." Simultaneously, John and I ducked back inside the Bronco. I threw it into gear and slammed on the gas, Drake still standing on the hood. The truck lurched forward and we barreled down the road, but Drake stayed planted, crouching like an oversized hood ornament. He bellowed at me over the wind, flinging aside his hat and tossing his hair. "Where are you going?" "Ha ha ha, let's go into the alley. He's waiting, smart guy." He reared back with the baton as if ready to smash the windshield. I slammed on the brakes. The truck spun out. Drake went flying. He vanished behind the miniature mountain range of piled snow along the road. I heard a faint scream that twisted into a howl, a high-pitched sound that human vocal cords couldn't duplicate. I considered going to help him. The urge quickly passed. I threw the truck in reverse, stepped on the gas, threw it into gear, and fishtailed down the road. I peered into my mirrors, looking nervously for him or his naked snow-crotched partner. Their car was nowhere to be seen. Molly stood and stared at the back window, shuddering and issuing a low, rumbling growl. Amy was asking something, asking what was wrong with him. Was he dead? Should we go back? Neither I nor John answered. I just drove. Gotta push on. Don't even look back. Something moved in my rearview mirror, a dark shape against the snow. I looked, thought I saw something. Something moving fast. Not a person. Or maybe I didn't see it. We found the inlet road in the snow, turned in and crept through the mall parking lot. We watched for other parked vehicles, saw none. Our light was fading fast. We filed out and loaded up and marched across the lot, Molly in the lead, our heads on swivels. Visibility didn't even extend to the edge of the parking lot, where a white curtain of snow hid the rest of the world. I had the gun in my hand, didn't even remember pulling it out. A snowflake flew right up my nose. Just before we reached the door, I saw John spin around, like he had seen something in the swirling mass of white. I squinted, could see nothing. We both dismissed it as adrenaline. We should have known better. We filed inside, using the same entrance John had used earlier that morning. Snow was pouring into the skylight now, piling an inch high on the floor, drafts of chilled air flowing down from the gap. Once inside and out of the wind, John flicked the lighter that served as the pilot light for the toy flamethrower. John said, "Drake's foot. What was the deal with that? I thought he was trying to kick your head and he just missed." "He had that symbol, the little pie, like Molly." "What do you think? It's like a mark of some kind?" "Of what? Evil?" Amy asked, "Wouldn't it make it harder to do evil if they had to carry around a mark?" John shrugged. "Once they're barefoot and kicking you, it's already too late. Follow me." We went into the maintenance room. To John and me, the big, decorative doorway stood in the center of the wall to our right, plain as day, and as out of place as the face on Mars. Amy saw only a wall, until, of course, she tried viewing it through the Scooby glasses. I let the little maintenance door close behind me. John looked at Amy and nodded his head toward the other door and said, "Ghost door." I said, "Please don't call it that." Molly trotted past me and went right to the door and sniffed at it. "Interesting," John said. John said, "I feel like we should look for a save point." I saw a long, curved handle on the door. I let out a long breath and raised the gun. John raised the fire gusher. I reached out for the handle and watched as my hand passed right through. "Shit," John said. "It's a ghost knob." I sighed and looked at John, was about to suggest heading back home and curling up in front of the fireplace, but then Amy stepped forward, the wet and wrinkled cardboard glasses askew on her face. She reached out with her left arm, the arm that in reality didn't have a hand, but with the hand that I could see, the ghost of a hand that was no longer there. She reached out and grabbed the door handle that was also not really there. The handle turned. With a rumbling not unlike the sound in your head when you crunch ice, a vertical slit formed in the wall and then tore open, widening. John and I both crouched into a fighting stance, and I felt my bladder loosen a little. The wall melted and peeled back like a curtain until there was a door-sized opening before us with a bunched seam around the edge, rolls of plaster and jutting splinters of wood. Beyond it was a tiny round room that I somehow sensed was an elevator. John stepped through the door and looked to his right. He pointed out a number on the wall in black that said 10. After a few seconds, it switched to 9. I felt Molly brush past my legs and trot into the open doorway. I turned, put my hands on Amy's shoulders. "Go." "What? No." "You've got money. From the insurance? When your parents—" "Yeah, so—" "Wait for us. Wait someplace light. Give us an hour. Then if we're not back, take my truck and—" "David, I can't even drive." I dug in my pocket and pressed my cell phone into her hand. "Then call a cab. I'm dead serious. If we're not back in an hour, fly. Take the cab straight to the airport and fly away. Get on a plane. Go to Alaska. Stay far away from this place forever and ever and forget you ever know me." "Alaska? Why?" "Because it's always daytime there." "No, it's not." "Actually, Dave," John said from behind me, "I think it's always nighttime there." "It doesn't matter," squealed Amy, "because I'm not going any—" "Amy, please, this is insane. When that door opened, the only thought that went through my mind was I would be damned for letting you die at the hands of whatever came through it. We've gone this far and you're still okay, and I want to do this one good thing while I've got the chance. For no other reason than because when I die, and I'm pretty damned sure now that I will within the hour, I want to be able to say I did this one last thing, this one unselfish thing before I went." I pulled the Smith & Wesson from my pocket and went to put it in her other hand, realized she didn't have another hand, then shoved it into her coat pocket instead. Amy started to say something, but was interrupted when the metal door exploded. The little maintenance door flew across the room and bounced off the opposite wall. We all ducked, and in a cloud of dust I saw something the size of a man, but shaped all wrong. Backward joints jutting into the air, a tiny brainless head, skin of notched alligator hide. There was a second of brain paralysis when I couldn't register that I was seeing, but I had seen the thing before, in Jim's basement, only this one was moving, crouching low like a predator, turning to look at us. Amy was on her knees and had opened her mouth to say something, but before she could, a column of flame poured past her face. "Down!" screamed John, about a half-second later than I would have preferred. Orange fire licked the creature and the floor and the wall behind it. I thought I smelled my own hair burning. The beast writhed and thrashed about, but apparently its skin wasn't that flammable because John let off. There were only small tons of flame licking at its shoulders. It looked pissed. John worked the shotgun-like pump on the squirt gun to build up the pressure and fire again. I flung my body aside and plunged my hand in my pocket to get the Smith, then remembered I'd given it to Amy 10 seconds ago. I pulled out my car keys instead and flung them at the beast. It bounced off its chest with a jingle. The monster advanced on me, racing past Amy with quick, blurry little steps, moving like it was on fast forward. I tried to stand, but suddenly there were claws around my neck, and a second after that I was flying. A wall pounded my back, and suddenly I was in the little round elevator looking up at John. The beast had thrown me like a child's toy. I scrambled to my feet, and this thing was on me again, filling the doorway, blocking us into the little round room. Molly was standing there next to me, sniffing at the monster's foot, and deciding it would be unpleasant to eat. John was screaming something, but then this thing had its claws on my shoulder, pain spilling down the whole side of my body. I leaned my head around the beast and screamed, "Amy, run!" She stood there behind the beast, petrified for a long moment. The beast was doing something with its other hand, rearing back, probably half a second from ripping my face off. I felt John's hands clumsily prying at the monster's claws, trying to get them off me. The beast's face was 2 inches from mine, its little eyes twitching, and I could smell the thing, and it smelled like Old Spice somehow. From the corner of my eye, I saw the number on the wall said 2. Amy turned to go, and suddenly I had a new mission, to keep the beast here, to make it take as long as possible to eat us. A second beast appeared. In the ruins of the maintenance doorway, another monster just like this one. As it advanced on Amy, I had the crazy thought that the thing had clumps of snow stuck to its crotch. The number on the wall vanished. The ghost door opened. Everything stopped. The wall had melted back into place as if it had always been as solid as a wall. Suddenly, I was looking at the head and shoulders and claws of the monster emerging from the solid wall, as if it were a mounted hunter's trophy. The ghost door had closed right on the bastard, half on his side and half on the other. After a second, the several chunks clumped to the floor, leaving red stains behind on the wall. The clawed hand was still embedded in my shoulder, the severed arm hanging off and dripping red on the floor. John muttered, "What the... Wonder how many employees they lose that way." "Amy!" I screamed into the wall, tearing off the shorn limb and flinging it to the ground with disgust. The claws were still twitching on their own when it landed. Molly was at my feet, barking, yelping. I heard nothing from the other side. I pounded the wall with my palms, then felt the surface sliding under my fingers. "Amy! Amy!" I punched the wall and thought I broke my hand. I felt motion and knew that we were moving upward, which was impossible because the mall did not have a second floor. I cursed again, put my hands on my knees, realized that every life that touched mine ended in utter horror. Molly whimpered at my feet. John said something about reaching the top and being ready, and I got the idea. I stood upright and took the chainsaw from John, trembling all over. I looked over the chainsaw, figuring out how to work it. Could I have gotten caught in this situation with a dumber weapon? I glanced around and realized the boombox hadn't made it into the elevator. Man, did any of it matter at this point? Up and up and up we went. Was the elevator climbing in midair? John held the fire gusher at the ready. He was saying something about how there was nothing we could do, and we just had to get in and out fast enough that we had all the more reason to survive, and blah blah. Whatever. The trip took 20 damned minutes, hundreds of feet. Finally, we jolted to a stop, and an opening appeared in the wall. We were looking at a long corridor, rounded at the top, and made seemingly of smooth stone, like marble or polished granite. It was lit with fluorescent lights and decorated with warning signs about contamination and ID badges. I wrapped my fingers tight around the plastic handle of the chainsaw and stepped into the hall, Molly following a step behind. We went maybe the length of 4 or 5 city blocks, John with a little pilot flame dancing at the end of his flame-throwing toy, me wondering how much noise the chainsaw would make when I pulled the rope thing, or if it even had gas in it. We reached a door, just a regular metal door with a knob. We readied ourselves. John flung it open and we ducked inside. The floor turned into a metal grate, and we realized we had emerged onto a catwalk. I looked over the rail and saw we were suspended over an expanse the size of an airplane hangar, but dimly lit. The floor was populated with people in white, bustling around like a marketplace, swarming around tables and equipment. It was noisy as hell, machines and grinding and rustling of feet, people working in the dark. We took a few steps forward and realized we weren't alone. A man wearing a white jumpsuit with a hood and a glass faceplate that reminded me of the contamination-free clean suits you see people wearing in labs stood on the catwalk about 10 feet away. He had a Subway sandwich in one gloved hand and a pack of cigarettes in the other. He stared at us for a long moment, eyes bouncing from Molly to my chainsaw to the finger of flame dancing from a tool that the man probably couldn't help but think was a flame-throwing squirt gun. John said, "We're from the fire department." The man spun on his heels and sprinted the other direction, feet clanging on the grated floor. We gave chase. He passed through a doorway. We followed and found ourselves on a spiral stairwell going down. John shouted at the man all the way, asking to see his flammability permit. The man hit bottom and threw himself out of another doorway. We followed and found ourselves at ground level on the factory floor, or whatever it was, surrounded by people in white jumpsuits who were doing an excellent job of ignoring us. These men did not wear the face masks and seemed, to a man, to be completely bald. Dark, dark, dark. Little red lights here and there on pieces of machinery that I couldn't identify. But no overhead lights, and no lamps, and nothing but little glowing patches that cast upside-down shadows. The man we were chasing disappeared into the crowded darkness, and we didn't follow. To my left were blue plastic barrels, rows and rows of them, hundreds. At the edge were two without lids, full of a deep crimson fluid that indeed looked like transmission fluid. Two men were standing over one of the open barrels, dipping into it and collecting samples and vials. One of the men turned to face me, and I saw that he did not have a face. Or, I should say he had half a face. The forehead curled down over where the eyes should be, joining the cheeks. The nostrils were wide and flat, African. He had a thin, lipless mouth and huge ears. The guy next to him was the same. The four guys down the row as well. Those guys were hefting huge translucent plastic bags, vacuum-packed and shrunk around what looked like sides of beef. I gawked around like a little tourist kid. Along my left were long glass tanks as tall as houses, something you'd see at a city aquarium. The liquid inside was a cloudy pink. Floating inside were pale, blurred shapes that might have been people and other things, smaller lumps that held the shape of small animals, dogs and things like squirrels. I walked down the row, dazed. I blinked, trying desperately to adjust to the semi-darkness, trying to take everything in. I had the crazy thought that no wonder they didn't pay to light the place. Most of the people that didn't have eyes. No need to pay the extra electric bill. No matter where you go, management is always a bunch of cheap bastards. I heard John make a breathy sound behind me, shock or disgust, or both. I followed his gaze and saw a wire cage 20 or so feet away, containing a thin young boy, maybe 10 years old. He stood there, looking terrified, fingers hooked through the wire mesh, staring at me with wide blue eyes. There was a device next to the cage, round and maybe 5 feet tall. It had a red light glowing on the side. The light flipped to green, an electronic sound emitted. The boy screamed. The boy's skin bubbled and wrinkled, one of his eyes deflated and ran down his cheek as a white goo, not unlike semen. Muscle liquefied and fell off his bones. He folded into the ground, left as a quivering lump. The lump bubbled and twitched and took on shape. 2 stumpy feet emerged, a cloven hoof, 2 more feet, a round body. I heard whimpering behind me, Molly watching along with me. In 5 seconds, I was looking through the cage at a pink, well-fed pig. Motherfucker. That was John behind me. The pig trotted calmly over to the wires of the cage, sniffing at me. It put its front hooves on the wire cage, and I thought, but wasn't sure, I saw the same imprinted pie tattoo Molly had once had, and Drake had, and what the fuck did it all mean? I yanked the pull string on the chainsaw so hard I thought I'd rip it out. The saw roared to life. John looked down at Molly and said, "You better put that bomb because we're blowing this place to hell." "Put it down." John and I spun to see a man in one of the clean suits, maybe 30 feet away, pointing an enormous rifle at us that seemed to have too many barrels. His voice was filtered through a small speaker on the side of the hood, and he was shouldering his way past the white-suited workers. John did not put the flamethrower down. What he did instead was point the flaming end of the thing at the man and say, "You put yours down, asshole." I said, "I do it, sir. We're pissed." "You have 1 second to drop that chainsaw on that thing." At this point, John flung himself to the ground and screamed, "You shot me! Ah!" Not a shot had been fired. I rushed to John's side. "You shot him! He has 4 kids! Or should I say 4 orphans?" The man stepped over, the gun trained on John. The weapon seemed to be from the year 2050, smooth sides and a thin electronic sight that glowed green. There was a small barrel on the bottom and a cavernous one on top that looked like it fired cannon shells. "You, step away and get on the floor over there." I said, "You shot him, you son of a bitch!" "Do it and do it now." I stood and backed away. The man loomed over John and aimed the rifle right at his head. "You're not shot. Get up." 2 urges rushed through me at the same moment. There was the urge to surrender, to put an end to the tension and fear and accept my fate. And then there was the urge to do violence. I don't recall making the choice. All I know is that my muscles caught fire with adrenaline, and I suddenly felt the fear and rage that is the most intense high the human animal can feel. In that split second, I knew I was overmatched, but I also knew that if I was going to die, this was how I wanted to do it. I wanted to give this asshole a scar with an interesting story behind it. I flung myself at the man, swinging the chainsaw like a baseball bat. I was aiming high, trying to chop his arm off at the shoulder. I missed by 2 feet and hit his hand. It was the hand holding the grip of the rifle. The spinning chain bounced off the gun and the impact made me drop it. The chainsaw fell to the floor, rattling on the ground with the vibration of the motor. Smooth. But the man screeched in pain and, to my horror, 2 of his fingers dropped to the ground in a red splatter. The rifle clattered down to the concrete. I dove for the gun and grabbed it by a handle that was slick with blood. I found the trigger to be where it was on most guns. I aimed at the man's chest and climbed to my feet. John stood, looking at the man's fingerless stumps with disgust. I said, "Sir, you need to get that looked at." The man didn't move. My heart hammered. I realized I had crippled this man for the rest of his life. John said, "This is the part where you run away and find a first aid kit, dipshit." The man got to his feet and stumbled off. Around us, dozens or hundreds of the bald, faceless workers stood as still as the mannequins they resembled. Everything had come to a stop. Machines were being shut down. I tried to catch my breath, felt like my bladder was going to let go. I said, "This is going well." There was a pock sound, and suddenly one of the blue barrels next to me spun a leak. John and I looked at it curiously for a moment before we noticed about a dozen men in clean suits racing toward us from just about every direction, each armed, dodging the worker mannequins and toppling equipment. I raised the rifle, no idea what to do, heard pops of gunfire that seemed faint in the cavernous room. I turned, pointed to the massive tanks of pink fluid and who knew what else, and pulled the trigger. The gun exploded, or seemed to. Instead of the crack of a rifle shot, it let out a thunderous boom that punched the butt of the rifle into my shoulder. The tanks erupted into a spray of glass. Fluids and flailing shapes poured out into the floor, faceless workers sprinting off in every direction. Madness ensued. Inhuman screams, crashing glass, toppling tables. The things that spilled out of the tanks were writhing, thrashing limbs around, and I thought I saw a human face stuck on the body of a hairless baboon. But it was all dark blur, and John took off running. I followed. We dodged people like running backs, the chaos passing around us. The scenery was a department store hodgepodge of nonsense, something out of a dream. We ran past hundreds of the walking mannequins, past tables full of clothes and what looked like tailoring equipment and rolls of cloth, a shelf full of underwear. We ran past a section of men working on what looked like dentistry, drilling and crafting bridges and false teeth. We knocked over chairs and tables and filing cabinets. We saw a young woman strapped to a table, her legs missing. We saw racks of fat bags like we saw in Amy's bathroom, imprinted with numbers. I saw a man chained to a wall who seemed to have snakes for arms, each hand replacing by snapping jaws and venomous fangs. I saw Molly as a low running copper streak up ahead and realized with horror that John was following her. I heard more shots and saw 2 of the mannequin men fall, ragged holes in their backs. My guts turned to liquid and my hands tightened around the bulky rifle, feeling sweat and sticky blood on the trigger. We reached a wall and I saw wide stairs leading to a double door made of brushed steel, like a bank vault, a closed bank vault. I heard shouts and clanging and saw people on the catwalk overhead, saw white suits circling around us in the crowd and heard orders shouted from every direction. A booming voice emerged from a public address system, announcing things in a throaty language that sounded like Hebrew. I suddenly knew how that woodchuck felt. I pulled up the rifle, found a little switch next to the handle and flipped it, hoping it would make the other barrel work. I raised it to my shoulder. So freaking dark. I tried to get a fix through the glowing green sights. I felt hands on me. I squeezed the trigger and the gun roared, fire erupting, the barrel jumping like a jackhammer. I lost control of it almost immediately, the gun pushing my shoulder back until I was shooting straight up. In 3 seconds, I was clicking an empty gun, night-blinded, smelling gunpowder. I heard a thump, 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 and realized it was bodies falling off the catwalk above. Hands on me again, the worker clones, or whatever they were, grabbing my jacket and pulling my hair. The gun was ripped from my hands, and I heard a whoosh, a sound suspiciously like a gun being swung through the air. A bomb went off in my skull. Lights flared in front of my eyes, and I went down hard. I heard barking and growling, felt Molly thrashing around near me. I almost went out. I heard John's voice, shouting in the bedlam, "Gentlemen, I would like to propose a toast!" And then the whole world was on fire. Heat and light and horrible, inhuman shrieks. I got on my hands and knees and saw John hosing everything down, a fountain of orange light glaring in the darkness, a crowd of dark limbs flailing in a pool of flame. A hand grabbed me again from the crowd, its sleeve on fire, a firearm, and I kicked at it, got free. From beside me, John frantically pumped the gun, and again flame poured forth with a sound like rushing wind. Suddenly, I was being pulled up to my feet, pulled backward, pulled to the spot where the metal door had been. It was apparently open now because we kept going, into another space, a small area that felt like a corridor. I heard the heavy clang of the door closing, and suddenly a light flickered on. It was John who had hold of me, a fistful of my jacket in his hand. He spun toward the door and we saw a thin man standing there, next to a metal box in the wall with a series of red buttons. It was Robert North. He looked us over, then said simply, "Incredible." We were alone in a hallway, an orchestra of sounds from the other side of the steel door. Molly looked that direction and growled. North stepped away from us and strode down the corridor. We followed. I put my hand on my aching skull, pulled away bloody fingers. John took his hands off me and said, "Can you walk?" "Yeah." North led us through one doorway, then another. We finally emerged into an enormous round chamber with steps that led down to a platform, the place set up not unlike a basketball stadium. At the heart of the room, where center court would be, there were maybe a dozen tall arches arranged in 2 concentric circles. It reminded me of Stonehenge. Around the room were beds and examination tables, but nobody was on them. On the floor, on a small platform, sat the fat bag, the exact one from Amy's bathroom, 44.42 kilograms on the side. And not far from that sat the lifeless, copper-haired dummy I had seen appear on Amy's couch. North led us out of the Stonehenge room, barely glancing at it, and out another door. We went down another hall and into another large domed room. This one had a cylinder of black glass in the center that rose all the way up to the ceiling. North closed the door behind us, another sliding double door with metal a foot thick. I saw there were no other exits from the room, and whatever comfort I had felt from escaping the mob had vanished. This was the end of the line. North said, "I have 1,000 questions to ask, but no time to ask them." I said, "We have to get back, to ground level, to the mall. Amy is—" He turned, like he couldn't hear me, and walked toward the cylinder. I glanced around and saw the walls, like all the walls here, seemed to be made of glass-smooth stone. The door and the controls for the door all seemed to have been added later, the wiring and metal conduits on the exterior of the wall. I wondered again where exactly this place was. Were we still on Earth? I ran up behind North, said, "Get us out of here! Get us out and tell us where would be the best place to put a bomb." John said, "Yeah, the dog is rigged to blow." John shook the pink plastic tank of flamethrower fuel on his hip, found it empty. He blew out the lighter at the barrel of the toy, then dropped it all to the floor. I noticed the barrel had partially melted. North said, "I do not think you fully appreciate what this is." I nodded toward North and said to John, "This is the guy, the one who I saw in my truck that night." John said, "Okay. Can you help explain what the fuck this place is, and what they're making out there?" I waved my hand with impatience and said, "He can tell us all about that shit after we're out of here, and after we've gotten to Amy, and after we blow this place to hell, but before those assholes come rushing through that door." North said, "I believe Amy is safe, and I assure you, the men outside cannot get in here. I know this facility very well." "How do you know about Amy?" I asked. "You're a part of this. You work for those people?" North said, "I was born here. And as for what they're doing out there, well, they're doing the same thing all thinking creatures do. From the moment they come to life, trying to change the world as they see fit." He looked back at the black column. What do you think you're looking at there? John said, You're going to be looking at my fist, and then Dave's dick if you don't. Take a moment and try to understand what you've seen, North said. You will not be angry once you understand. Your anger clouds you. North glanced around the room. I was born here, as I said, 1 month ago. Do you understand? I was trying to think up a new threat of violence for North, and then I saw John's eyes go wide. I turned on the black column and saw activity there in the darkness, swirling shapes pouring through it, streaks of light. Life. North said, Imagine a garment, woven from a single thread, and imagine that after forming that garment, that same continuing thread was used to weave another garment similar to the first. So you have a thread that is simultaneously part of two garments, but at the same point, the thread stops being part of one garment and becomes part of the other. John waved his hand impatiently and said, Who gives a shit? North gestured toward the column. This is the thread. I said, Good. John, pry the bomb from Molly's colon and blow this fucker. North said, The key to saving your friend Amy is through there. I said, You want us to go through? What's in there? Hell? Is that what happened? This thing opened up and a bunch of you monstrous fuckers came crawling in? That's why we've got so much weird shit in this town? No man has traveled through this portal, though they have tried it. Then what the fuck are you talking about? I screamed. John glanced at Molly and said, Shit the bomb, Molly. North said, No. The only ones who can travel back and forth are the dark men. John said, Blacks? Is that why there aren't any in Undisclosed? They get sucked in? This threw North. He recovered and said, No. The dark men are the ones who lived, but have been torn from their bodies, through death and, well, other circumstances you would not understand. They come from all worlds with sentient thought. They are unrestricted by matter, and as such can exist in one dimension, and then the next, and one time, and then the next, and then in none at all. They exist in numbers greater than you can imagine, a dark ocean that flows between worlds, and as more thinking beings are born and die, the ranks of the dark men swell like the waters of a flooding river. Okay, said John, let's blow it up then. He leaned down and grabbed Molly by the shoulders. We need you to shit the bomb, Molly. Shit it. Shit the bomb. She didn't even try. John said, Fuck it, let's light the dog on fire. North said, You cannot destroy it. If you could, your universe would vanish into it. I looked at him, then spun on Molly. Shit it, Molly. Now! Shit it! North seemed to be losing patience, and he said, Through that passage is the only way to save Amy Sullivan. I turned on him. Are you finally getting to the part where you tell us how to do that? He must pass through. You just said there is a reason why you have drawn so much interest, Mr. Wallen. The ones who run this facility, and others, have devoted more time and resources than you can imagine to developing an ability to pass from one side to the next. You and John here apparently can, and we do not know why. I said, I know why, but I'm sure not telling you. North said, If you do not go in, where will you go? He had a point, and we had come this far. I looked at the column and said, Fine, how do we get in? Just decide that you want to get in, and you will. I reached out a hand and touched the surface, like cut onyx. Close to it I thought I could see the color in the blackness, blue with streaks of white. The column felt as solid as stone, but then suddenly I saw my fingers push into it, like it was made of warm wax. My hand vanished up to my wrist and then my elbow, and then I changed my mind, tried to pull back and realized I had no chance of doing it short of cutting off my arm. I turned to John to tell him to find something sharp, but at that moment, blackness fell over my vision.